Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle SMB Finance Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Rosalind Johnson, President, CEO at Corporate Advisors. We're excited to have Rosalind and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled SMB Tools and Technologies, Scaling for Growth. Welcome, Rosalind, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. I am excited to be with you today. Thank you for joining us on our insightful and innovative conversation on SMB tools. I look forward to our next 50 minutes together. With that, let me give you a little brief introduction about me, and then we'll go ahead and we'll introduce all of the other panelists. I'm the president and CEO of the Corporate Advisors, where we provide strategy, governance, and M&A consulting and advisory services. Prior to assuming this role, I was in a number of Fortune 50 companies, McAfee, Intel Security, and most recently McKesson, where I held senior level roles in M&A. I started out in finance and accounting, so I speak your language, and I am a Texas CPA. With that, I am going to turn it over to Alonso Ramos to introduce himself.
Thank you, Rosalind. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Alonso Ramos. My career started in Colgate-Palmolive, where I worked for 23 years. I started in Latin America, but I have worked mostly in the US in different divisions and states across the country. After that, I took my first CFO role in a healthcare company. And then my second CFO role was in a manufacturing company here in the Illinois area. And right now I'm on my third CFO also in manufacturing in the Illinois area. So I work very close to manufacturing operations and the strategic. I am now a global CFO. And again, live in the Chicagoland area. I'm looking forward to participate in this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Alonso. With that, Deepta Arora, would you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Rosalind. Hi, everyone. I'm Deepta Arora. Very excited to be here today. I'm a finance leader in the technology space, and in my current role, I'm VP of Finance for a company called Circle CI. Circle CI is a late-stage tech startup. We're a SaaS company in the developer operations space. Prior to Circle CI, I led FP&A teams for a number of different public companies. I was at a cybersecurity company called A10 prior to Circle CI, and then working for an entertainment company called TiVo before that. I've had my whole career in finance and accounting with almost 20 years of experience. I'm currently based out of San Jose, California, and I'm looking forward to today's panel discussion.
Thank you. And then Carla Rodriguez, she will round out our panel. So Carla?
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Rodriguez. I'm a CPA in the New York City area. I've been doing accounting and finance for over 20 years. I got my start at Ernst & Young. I worked in public accounting for a few years. The past 10 years, I've been working in senior level financial management roles with a focus on growth and transformation. And I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. And with that, let's jump right into our first panel question. So, ladies and gentlemen, from your experience, how have finance technologies evolved over the last 2 or 3 years? Carla, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's been a large evolution in finance technologies, things like cloud-based accounting software, automation technologies, data analytics, artificial intelligence, AI. I think a big thing with the onset of COVID have really brought the real-time data, accessing from anywhere, remote access, and so on, the cloud software has really been, for me, in my experience, the biggest change in the last couple of years, where it really kind of took the finance department from kind of needing to be in the office, or at least one or two for reporting or for accounts payable, for accounts receivable, to really bring that to, a virtual option. So that's.
Yeah, I can chime in here,
Okay.
Rosalind.
Good.
I mean, as Carla said, I think in the last 5 years, there's really been a true eruption of the options available in finance for different tools and technologies. I mean, I remember like 20 years ago, like being in the FP&A space, there was like one tool. Maybe in the last 10 years, like a couple more came out, but in the last 5 years, there's probably just even for FP&A forecasting and planning tools, there's like over 30 different tools. So there's really been an eruption in like the options that are out there. There's been a move to the cloud, as Carla was alluding to, that's made the remote working much more easy, accessibility to the data much more easy, and sort of like enabled us to move off of this being on premises with a lot of the technologies and moved everything to the cloud, making everything a lot more seamless and streamlined in terms of accessibility. I think even in the other areas of finance, I was giving FP&A as an example, but I see a lot of technologies coming up, for example, in the travel management space, in the order to cash space, and in the overall reporting space. So there's definitely been an eruption in the last 5 years, like across all different spaces of finance.
And then, so let me just follow up, because both of you guys have said it's been an eruption. Would you say the pandemic enabled a quicker pace, or would you say it's the introduction of new technology or the evolution of technology that has also aided in, I guess, the fast pace of the tech tools and technologies that have become available to finance?
I would say it's a mix of both, in my opinion. There were some things that were available and some things that people just, didn't know if they were ready for. So I think that, with COVID happening, they kind of, well, maybe I'll look into that more, but, there's always been this, evolution and, people buying in and having more options. And then I think, with that, there's more opportunity, and then there's more demand of, okay, well, I need that now.
Yeah, I feel, Rosalind, the transformation to digitization has been happening for a while across many different industries. And I almost feel actually the finance space was probably a laggard to this, because if you look at like tools for software developers and stuff, that's been happening, that evolution's been happening a lot longer than probably the finance one has been. So I think just with the transformation to more and more digitization, this had been happening anyway. And with COVID, it just made it more rapid because everybody sort of got on the bus, like that wasn't even doing this, was forced to digitize things that they hadn't digitized before. So I think COVID just made it more rapid, but the evolution was already happening.
Okay, cool. Alonzo, would you like to weigh in, or?
It is interesting because it's like 5-10 years ago, they started with a lot of functionalities, a lot of developments. It started before COVID, really. At a certain point, they saw an opportunity in finance because of many activities, or at least from the perspective of technology, they seem to be repetitive, or that it was kind of easier to put in a program. And as such, we're seeing a lot of developments, especially in the accounts payable, account receivables, as mentioned, order to cash, procurement to pay. Those are very common. But it also have been a lot of development on, and Dipti mentioned it, is actually the ERP is going into a cloud base instead of a server base. And overall, more interaction between the systems that maybe the systems that you use with the bank or with another provider for account receivable, for cash management, interacting with your accounting systems and back and forth. So that's what it has happened. Actually, it has accelerated the last 5 years. the fact that COVID started just a little bit, as Carla said, is like it's a combination of both, because it just made it fast, or even it made it even more obvious the need to have digital solutions for people to be able to work remotely, and to continue in operation even if you're not in the traditional office environment. So it didn't stop. Actually, if any, could accelerate a little bit more, but it already started. And it's interesting what it has caused to the function of finance, because it really hasn't decreased the need for finance professionals. I think what is happening is slowly, but we know it's happening, because you compare 10 years from ago from how we're doing now, is that there's more and more the focus on finance to work as in a more strategic or analytical role, and a little less time spent on in very long tasks or repetitive tasks, or tasks that have been able to be facilitated through technology.
So Alonso, I want to follow up on that, and you perfect leeway into my next question for the panel is, how has the evolution of technology transformed role of finance in the various functions and processes? And you hit the nail on the head when you said it has allowed for more strategic nature work. So Deepti, would you care to weigh in on, how have you seen that evolution take place?
Yeah, I think the evolution of finance to become more strategic has been happening for a while, and that has been happening even without the help of technology. What technology has actually enabled here in terms of making the role more strategic is that it's enabled that to happen more rapidly. As Alonso was alluding to, we've been able to automate a lot of the manual tasks by providing technology. And teams can focus on providing insight rather than trying to pull together the data and doing number crunching. And actually, in small businesses, what this has really helped with this, small business such as mine, like the addition of technology is very impactful to finance teams, because it helps to grow and scale. And instead of adding more hands on keyboard to do work, you're augmenting the team's work by making it more streamlined, efficient, and sort of passing off some of the manual work into a system, rather than adding more folks to help the teams to grow.
Okay, Paula?
Yeah, so, they touched on, obviously, the strategic, the automation, the agility of the team and needing to be able to be flexible. But with that, the leadership has changed, financial leadership. So, again, we talked about, more remote options and, this remote access, and now we can hire remotely. So recruiting is looking different, leading, from a different demographic pool, and the skill set now that we're looking for has changed. So, where Dipti mentioned, yeah, we're going to stop, with automation, we don't have to do such manual process. And now the skill set that we look for and that we need to really drive and mentor is going to change as well, where we might have been looking for, strictly finance and accounting skills, maybe someone that, works well independently. Now we're looking for technical skills, someone that's, technologically savvy, a business analyst, maybe a storyteller, whether it's, presentation wise or in numbers, and, people that are collaborative, that, are able to work in a team, in just the finance accounting team, but also to kind of branch out into operations and, business and sales. And, at some levels, we need someone to make sure they have impact and to have influence. So I think, while it does change the finance, it really also changes the type of leaders we need in these seats. And, how are they going to help drive the change and help evolve the team?
Okay. And then Alonso, would you like to add anything? And I have a subsequent follow-up question also that Carla, you went directly into. But Alonso, any final comments here?
Well, I think what happens is that it comes in terms of expectations. I think at a certain point, I mean, there was the idea that artificial intelligence could to a certain extent replace some of the work done in finance, especially in terms of some accounting functions, some of the tax, some of the audit. And at a certain point, there was the idea. And it has influenced certainly, and it has changed the profession, but it is also has raised the profession to a new level. I think what's happening is that the professionals are working on things that they didn't get that involved before. Now more than ever is being considered finance, it is expected for finance to be a business partner in the organization. The traditionally finance stayed within finance. It was a little more isolated, kind of a little more transactional, generating reports. Now, well, I see it in the manufacturing area, but there are other spaces as well that I'm sure it applies the same. Is that finance needs to be a partner with the operations, whatever the operations mean, or with the all, I mean, it could be sales, it could be logistics, it could be planning, it could be production. And the fact that finance has a little bit of advantage because by looking at the numbers, somehow it has the advantage to be able to connect the dots into the different departments and see a little bit more of the overall picture of the business. And that would also allow finance to become a kind of the liaison between different departments and help each other to find solutions to their problems and to work in collaboration. So I think it has evolved definitely the profession, but the expectations is, and I hear it every time. And if I can mention, I mean, for all what they look for CFOs in organizations, I hear the story over and over again. We're not looking for another transactional, another operation, another person that is just going to be a finance only. We need somebody that is going to be more strategic, more involved with the team, and it could really advise them on many different regards. So that's part of the evolution we're seeing right now.
That sounds great. And so I have a question that is coming in from some of our participants, and I want to add it here because I think it hits direct to a point both Carla and Alonzo have alluded to. It sounds great to want to have well-rounded leaders and have a broader perspective in finance in our leadership. But given the current shortage of candidates, how do you all recommend approaching this challenge? And I'll start with you, Deepti.
Yeah, I think being clear on what are the essential skills for the leaders is important, right? Because there's a couple of considerations here. You have to look at what stage or size your company's at for like what kind of talent you want. So the leader that you probably have for a smaller company is not going to be the same as the leader that you're going to have for a slightly larger company, right? And like what phase is your company going through? Like, are you going through a change? Have you just been acquired? Like all of those circumstances play into what kind of leader you want. So I think being really clear on like what the leader needs to look like is essential, because I found that a lot of times when trying to recruit executive leaders, like companies will try to look for what you call like a unicorn. They want somebody who has like all of it, right? You've done this, you've done that, you have all these skills, and it becomes a lot harder then to find the right talent. But I think being clear on like which are the critical skills that you want this person to have is very important. And as both Carla and Alonso were alluding to, I think in the finance space, it's become more and more critical for the CFO or the finance leaders to be more strategic rather than have the technical skill set, because they can augment the gap of, for example, like if you hire a strong strategic CFO, it's okay if they're not an expert in revenue recognition. You can still go and find a good revenue recognition person that understands that understands ASC 606, that understands all these requirements. You can supplement some of the technical skills, hardcore technical skills, by them building out the team. But I think that, the strategic piece is really important, and you need to be clear on like what exactly should they have in terms of prior experience, depending on the stage and size of company and the current circumstances and environment of the organization.
Paula, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. So I think, for me, like what Dipti said, you have to narrow down to what you need. I think there's also a certain aspect of looking within. So, maybe teams currently don't have, a new technology. Are we able to train? Are we able to bring that in-house as far as, some sort of training and being able to make sure the staff has the opportunity for career advancement in that way. And, as far as looking externally, you know, basically you have to divide what is maybe teachable at any point and what is a skill that a must have. So I think for me, a lot of will and eagerness to learn is like a big thing when I hire. Skill, of course, you want someone that's, used to certain things and understands ways in finance and accounting. But, as we evolve, like we mentioned a couple of times already, that things that are now aren't going to be this way next year and the year after. So you want to make sure that we're hiring flexible candidates that are able to kind of grow with our team, evolve with our team. So like again, to reiterate what Dipti said, you need your set of skills and then of must-haves. And you also have to be flexible with that. But, beyond that, someone that is eager to learn, because we're always going to be learning and changing.
Involving and growing. And Alonzo?
Yes, I think it's partially a matter to become more attractive as a company. The company needs to be attractive to attract the right talent. And also it works a lot into retention. The company needs to be have a plan on how to retain people. Carla mentioned a lot of training. That's one of the major aspects. And I think for the finance leader, it requires to be very involved in the whole recruitment and onboarding process, and later development of the personnel. So, I mean, if your finance professional hiring in your department, or even influence the hiring in other departments, or have HR under your umbrella, which happens a lot, and you don't get involved personally, I don't recommend that at all. I mean, you need to be very, very involved from the beginning. For the whole process, you need to be right there, choosing, interviewing, talking to candidates. And once they start, I mean, have a very comprehensive plan on how to do the onboarding and the training, and continue always to have this development with the people. The way I do it is I schedule one-on-ones. I schedule first, I did it with all the employees, which is a little bit time consuming, but then I develop two leaders as the managers who do the one-on-ones with their own people. And that's how it goes. But I think one of the most important aspects for people is to make sure that they listen. And in order to be listened, you need to take the time for it. And take the time means take 1 hour every week, for example, to your directs, one of your directs. Or if you can do all in 1 week, you can do one in 1 week, and the other next week you do it with the other. But you need to maintain these sessions. That's I schedule it for 1 hour. I cannot tell you how many times it goes for 1 to 1 hour or more. And that we just don't stop talking, and we don't talk directly about work, but directly more about how are we doing, how the person is developing, what the areas of needs, how can they do better, what things we can do different, and this is dialogue. And at the beginning is difficult, because if the person is not used to it, or the employee is not used to it, it doesn't really know what to say. But you will be surprised after a few sessions how people open up, and how the trust is built, and how the communication just flows in a tremendous way. And you get to know your personnel very well, They learn to, obviously create an environment of trust. And that works excellent on retention, works excellent on commitment, on results. Is just for the employees to know that the manager is listening, is paying attention, is watching, he cares for you and for your development. That makes a world of difference. The worst thing you can do is ignore them or do performance review once a year. I mean, it gets becomes kind of awkward because it's the only time that you talk about performance in the whole year. Don't do that. Do it oftenly. Talk to the people oftenly, and build a relationship, a professional relationship with them. That's gonna work wonders on retention.
Well, thank you. So now I'm going to take a hard turn. What trends have you guys seen in technology in the SMB tool space in the last few years? What are the new trends you're seeing out there? And how are those trends being implemented in your organizations, or have they been, or are you considering some of those trends? And I'll throw one out there. It's a question that came in through the chat. AI, that's been in the news lately. So I know that's a big thing with chat. It's a chat GT. But how is that impacting finance? Have you seen an impact? And I will start with you, Carla.
Yeah, so definitely, when you say what are trending, definitely AI, and you mentioned ChatGPT for sure. It's you see it all over. I think what else is trending is cybersecurity, data analytics. I think is huge. I've been seeing that a lot as far as, again, helping take this role of finance to be more strategic. But when talking about data analytics, it can help in other areas as well, marketing, HR, business operations, and so on. I think another one is the robotic process automation, RPAs, for a lot of different things, but, helping, with the manual entries like we talked about before, and really, helping the accounting and some operations team with not having to enter data, not having to, pick up invoices and, scanning and so on. So I think those, what I see have been really big and very helpful in helping transform the role in accounting. I mean, obviously in business operations as well, but, in accounting and finance.
Yes.
Yeah, I can actually double down on the AI because I can give an example here. I mean, I'm definitely seeing AI being a common theme across a lot of industries, and finance is not excluded. And I think the use of AI in financial tools is making the tools more streamlined. It's making the tools smarter. It's being used heavily for predictive analytics in the forecasting space. And actually, at my current company at Circle CI, we did end up leveraging AI for predictive analytics, and I'll give the example of how we actually use this. So our model of the way we recognize revenue is based on consumption, and what that means is that we could be charging a customer $30 a month, but we don't recognize that $30 unless the customer is actually using our platform, right? So what happens is then it becomes this thing of like, you have to be able to predict how much a customer is going to consume in a particular month to determine how much your forecast would be for the month, for the quarter, for the year. And we end up leveraging an open source software called Profit to look at our customers' behaviors, like their historical behaviors, in order to determine what we think they're going to consume in the future. And so we actually ended up leveraging it pretty heavily, and also use this particular tooling to determine what our revenue forecast should be for the month and for the quarter and for the year. So I think it's helped to transform, like AI has definitely helped to transform predictive analytics in a case, and in a business model like ours, this would have been impossible to do without the use of AI.
And so how did you guys gain buy-in from your leadership because AI is a newer technology. And so I'm quite sure leaders from a, I guess, buy-in perspective may have had questions or concerns, or may have even been leery. So how do you gain buy-in from your leadership in your senior finance as well as, up your chain of command?
I will say that it needs to add value to the organization. Clearly, that will be the big difference. I think is there are many technologies out there, new technologies, as Dipti was mentioning, and the artificial intelligence has evolved. I mean, I get like without exaggerating, like probably 100 solicitations from vendors in a week easily for many of these technologies. And you've got to be careful because you need to find out what really makes sense for your business. Many times the offer is more than you need or not that necessarily fit your needs. Although there's more variety. Now they have software that say, well, this is suited for small companies, larger companies, manufacturing, healthcare, or they're going more into that. And which I appreciate. I appreciate all the offers and everything, but it is you gotta be careful and see that, make sure that even before you go to your leader, you need to convince yourself like this is really something that is gonna add value to my organization, and what is the difference that it makes, because it's gonna require, probably gonna have a cost, it's gonna require resources, it's gonna require commitment from many people, and in cost of replacement. And also you need to evaluate against what you do. I mean, sometimes the technology that you have is not also it represents a cost by itself, or it requires upgrades, or you need to make a change in any way. So that's part of the evaluation. But regardless, it's very important to be very clear that and when you see all those demos, make sure that what you are going to implement is something that is going to add value, is going to make a difference in your organization. I think that if you find that answer, I think is much easier to sell it to your CEO, whoever you have to, board of directors. And I mean, the idea needs to sell by itself. It needs to make sense. It needs to have clear benefits. Sometimes in terms of cost, efficiencies, combination of this.
Okay. And with all of these new technologies, what tips do you have from a cybersecurity perspective that go and pair with the new technology that's being introduced to the organization? So how are you pairing cybersecurity with that? And Deepti, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think cybersecurity is a key concern for everyone these days. And I think you need to make sure that as you're introducing new technology, that you have it vetted by, by your IT teams, you have the correct process in place to make sure that it's only accessing the data that's absolutely needed. It talks to only the systems that it needs to. It's sort of vetted in terms of like the way it's implemented, because it is becoming a lot more challenging to be able to control these things with them being in the cloud, you know, and then like having the systems, like most of even the finance systems need to speak to other systems to like get data, have different touch points, right? So this is becoming a lot more harder to sort of make sure it's all buttoned up. But I think having you know, when you're evaluating a new tool, getting your IT teams involved early, making sure that they're comfortable and their concerns are addressed, and having that process in place of like, how do we evaluate that this tool actually passes the sniff test is there with those teams, and making sure that they're involved earlier on to meet the requirements.
And Colin, Alonzo, I'm going to come to you, but Deepti, I want to circle back with you because you said you guys have introduced or implemented predictive analytics. So how soon did, you got the buy-in, this was a tool, this is what we wanted to go with. When did you go and reach out to your IT team and partner with them and say, hey, I want you to look at this tool with me? So was that early in the process or after the vendor had been selected? Or was it a part of the requirements gathering at the beginning? Give us some sense of how you partnered with your IT team for that implementation.
Yeah, it was early in the process, but we definitely got them involved after we had selected the vendor because we didn't want to like start getting all the requirements from all the different vendors. So when we had narrowed down like 2 vendors, because we were evaluating a number of different vendors, when we narrowed down like on 2 vendors, then we involved our IT group, asked them what are the things that we need to get from these vendors, got those data points, made sure they were comfortable with it, and then also getting them involved very heavily in the testing and implementation side of it as well. Once the process had started, was very successful to what enabled like all of these concerns to be alleviated successfully.
Okay. And then Carla, your thoughts on cybersecurity and partnering with these new technologies?
Sure. So just similar to what Dipti said, always keep, the technology department, up to date. When the last time I did the implementation, as far as how soon, it was quite soon. We identified something like an add-on integration to one of our financial systems. And but similar to what Dipti said, we had already known we liked this vendor, but before we understood more, we needed to make sure that this was going to be checked out by our, IT department. So, that was a big thing. And, is this possible? Is this a vendor that we can use? Do they have what they need? Because we didn't want to get too far into it and then, oh, whoops, this is a no-go. So
Yeah,
but
right.
we did go enough to say, hey, we really like this vendor and can we go further? So we had other add-ons from this vendor, so we were pretty comfortable there, but we wanted to make sure. But definitely work closely with the technology department when possible and when necessary, of course, to make sure that you're compliant and that it's going to be an ease of implementation in that area.
Alonzo.
Well, I think Carla and Dipti explained it very well. Don't have much to add to it.
Okay.
My company has been into this issue of actually being a kind of a target on cyber hacks, and well, that was. At this point, we're in very good shape, but at a certain point, yeah, it became a problem. The only thing I will add to what they say is that the cyber security insurance became even more important than before, and that we maintain it. And I think the big value added of the insurance is that they provide insurance, but the whole idea of insurance is not to use it, right? They provided a lot of advice on how to avoid another security attack. And we have implemented those, and at a certain point, they look kind of extreme, but they work. We haven't been subject of any new attack. Number one, that's the very first news, and I think we're in very good shape. But I think there's a lot of to gain in terms of collaborating with an insurance company that is really interested not only on providing the policy, but also committed on helping the company avoid the situation in the future.
Well, thank you. And then Dipti, what are your thoughts on cybersecurity insurance? Alonzo mentioned it, so what do have you guys purchased it at your company, your individual thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a must-have now for any company. If any of us think that we're not we're not susceptible to cybersecurity threats at this point in time, I think that's just denying what can happen at any point in time. So I think this is a must given. And like Alonzo was saying, I know there was some commentary about like how do you evaluate this and whatnot. A lot of the actually the big four audit firms and audit firms as well do cybersecurity evaluations too. So if this is a concern for you, if you want to evaluate where you stand as a company, a lot of the audit firms as well will do a cybersecurity assessment, and that's something that you can get done. But I think having a, how we have like a crisis management or a disaster recovery plan for anything, cybersecurity is one of those things that you also need. Cybersecurity attacks, that's one of the things that you need to have a plan for. as well, just as we would have a plan for like if an earthquake happened or a fire happened. This is one of the things that's kind of like you need to have a crisis management plan for, because it is something that can easily happen with us being now so digitized, working remotely, um, for all companies. And the other thing I was going to add is that in terms of, I know we were talking about it from the lens of like having a tool and evaluating cybersecurity there, but I think one of the things that's also very critical in terms of just avoiding cybersecurity attacks, specifically like for tooling and things like that, is making sure that people are well trained. Like, are your employees well trained? Do they understand like how these things can happen? That plays a very, very critical part, right? You want to avoid simple things like phishing attacks and whatnot, like making sure that your employees overall are very well trained. And if there's something specific to the tooling as well in terms of security, like training plays a very, very big part in ensuring that these attacks don't happen.
Okay, so then I want to ask another question. What does a successful implementation look like, and how do you budget for these new initiatives? Carla, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. So definitely, we talked a bit about it, but planning. So you need to have a plan to understand the cost, to understand the timing, to understand if you need more personnel, if you need overtime, or to hire consultants. So having to match that up with your goals, and obviously make sure that that aligns with it's on track with your plan. So I think some things as well is like to plan for the budget to make sure everything is successful, is to understand the operational costs as well. Like, do you need to buy software, hardware? Do you have monthly fees? Do you have quarterly fees? You have annual fees? So that's all a part in identifying needs to make sure you budget appropriately and make sure that it's going to be implemented, and the expectation at the end of the road is that it was successful. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, and so we're T-minus 10 minutes, and there are several questions that have come in our community, so I want to get to those, but I have one last question from our prepared questions is, have you seen or do you see reluctance to change when your employee base, when you're moving to these more automated and new initiatives and new processes and moving away from that traditional? And I know, Carla, you and Alonzo alluded to this earlier of, how do you go from procure to pay and do a lot of the manual entries to much more of automation. So I'm quite sure you've seen that change management. So kind of share with us any reluctance you saw either within your teams or you've heard about it as you worked with other leaders.
If you let me take this one quickly,
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's very important to involve the people from the beginning. Don't come up with a project or assign it simply, or get them involved in a further phase. Try to get the people that are going to work on the initiative from the beginning in the project, hear their opinion, let them participate, be part of the change. And instead of making like imposition, make it like a participation. If when we do this, because I think I've seen the reluctance all the time, but I think this works very well, because if you get the people involved from the beginning and make them part of the project, they start assuming ownership on it, and they start getting engaged on it, committed. They feel like they're part of the project. It's a little bit my project, not their project, and you have to do it. You have an option, right? So that could change everything. And even and when it comes to actual implementation or post implementation, there always, that there are always things that don't work right at the beginning. People react much better if they have been involved from the beginning and they were part of the decision and their opinion was listened. And when they start facing the initial problems, they have a more positive mindset in order to make it work, find a solution, and go with it. So That's my recommendation in that regard.
Well, thank you. Dipti or Carla, would you guys like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I can add a couple of thoughts. As Alonso was saying, I think it's critical to get the buy-in up front. And the more you can do this by adequately communicating up front, like why are you, what was the impetus for doing this system implementation, right? Helping people who are going to use the tooling understand why it's being done. How does this augment their work so that it alleviates any concerns around, okay, am I going to like not have a job once this comes in, right? Like helping them understand how actually this supplements their work and helps them become more efficient. It's critical. And then probably at the later on stages, making sure as you're further along with the implementation, making sure that people are adequately trained, because adoption is a key metric for success of any tool that's implemented. Like how well is it adopted by the users, and training plays a very critical part to make sure that the tool ends up getting used and adopted at the end.
Okay, so I have a couple of rapid fire questions that our community has sent in, so I want to make sure that I cover those. So Carla, I'll start with you. How can you encourage CEOs to want to move to more of the technology, the newer technologies? What would you say one data point, one recommendation would be?
Sure. I think like Alonso mentioned earlier is, what's the value add? Increasing efficiency, streamlining. Sometimes they're cost effective. I think a lot of times what CEOs like to hear is that also there's going to be free of error. Like sometimes I think we probably all heard they get financial statements or some other reporting that's not accurate. Manual entries, those, everyone makes a mistake, right? So some of the automation helps alleviate that, and having to free up time of the staff to do other things, of team members and so on, to be able to be more strategic and help with more high level things. I think that's a huge point for the buy-in.
Cool. Alonso, next rapid fire to you. What do you find to be the best management tool to monitoring productivity for those working from home, or do you have a tool that's monitoring those that are working from home? So
yes, great question. I saw it in the chat. Thanks for bringing it up. And I think it's, well, even if they're not working from home, because at least on my space manufacturing, usually you have different facilities.
right.
One of our major facilities right now for me is in Mexico, actually, which I visit every once in a while, but it's miles away. So for me, is in the same in previous jobs is even working from home in another location, you have to work with people remote to some extent. And there's no tool, there's no magic tool or electronic tool that will help you monitor productivity. But it goes, I'm gonna go back a little bit of what I was saying about building a professional relationship with your team. And it goes with everybody in the organization anyway. Especially in finance, in a position of leadership, you need to develop that relationship with their operations and even customers, vendors, and absolutely everybody. But even more so with your own team. And that takes time. I mean, it doesn't happen magically. It requires to listen to them, to have one-on-one sessions with them, having open communication, conversation, earn their trust. Don't take it for granted. I mean, is the fact that we are in positions of leadership doesn't mean that they just need to follow whatever we say. I mean, it's what about we convince them on what we explain what we were trying to achieve and see how they respond to that, and they listen their own opinion. Maybe they find different ways to do it. Set up objectives is very important. Set up goals, as usual, quantifiable, based on time, based on specifics, and evaluate the achievement of those goals and objectives. So at a certain point, I mean, if following this methodology, it doesn't, at a certain point, it doesn't really matter if the employee is remotely or not, or in a different location, because the work could be done in a equal or better way that they were in person. That doesn't mean that minimize the possibility to do in person. Actually, I big defender of trying to do things in person, because the quality of the conversations that you have in a face-to-face are always better through a lunch or through a meeting or somewhere somehow. They are always better. You don't need to do it every day, but they're always better than on video, for example. Or but still, I mean, realistically speaking, you cannot do that all the time in person. But what you can do is maintain communication all the time, and you can do that again especially by video, and having meetings like this in this kind of and build relationships and make sure you listen to the people and get them committed with you. So I think that's key. That could measure very well the productivity,
So,
wherever the person is working.
Alonzo, thank you for that. We were within 60 seconds of our time. So with that, Deepti and Carla, I'll give you final thoughts, a couple of quick words to share with the group.
Sure. I just want to say that, as we know, technology is always evolving. So I think the best thing for finance professionals to do is just evolve, go with the flow, teach your teams as well to constantly be flexible and evolve as technology evolves, and always be open-minded, because you will find solutions when you're not looking.
Deepti?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely +1 to what Carla was saying. I think as we're talking about technology, like technologies will continue to change, and as finance leaders, we need to make sure our teams are continuously learning, developing, growing, and remaining curious and knowing what's out there. I mean, I don't think any technology is ever going to be able to supplement the strategic aspect of finance. And the more we can continue to develop those skills, like being strategic, being insightful, providing true insight into the business. We have finance generally has a good bird's eye view of everything, which not all different departments have, like providing that insight, which no system or tool can provide. I think developing those skills are very, very critical and will continue to remain critical for the future. Thank you. I really enjoyed being a part of the panel.
Thank you, Alonzo, Deepti, Carla. I really appreciate your time today. And with that, Brittany, we will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much for such an insightful panel discussion. I also did want to thank everyone who joined us today for this fantastic session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you all so much again.